Nia Cartwright stood in front of the chalkboard, hands trembling, solving a problem her teacher said was just for fun. But when she neared the final answer, the fire alarm blared, unscheduled, unexplained, and perfectly timed. By the time she returned, her work had been erased. Now the school says the footage doesn't exist. But someone leaked the truth, and it's about to burn the whole system down. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sun slid through the cracked blinds of room 306 at Pine Hill High School, casting pale gold stripes across the rows of desks. The hum of idle conversation filled the classroom like a soft static, blending with the squeak of sneakers and the faint rustle of textbooks. It was just another Tuesday, or so it appeared. In the very last row, seated closest to the window and furthest from the board, sat 16-year-old Nia Cartwright. Her hoodie was slightly oversized, sleeves pulled over her hands, as she traced intricate numbers and symbols in the margins of her notebook. Her black curls framed her face like a halo. But she didn't need divine light to shine. She had math. She didn't look like a math person, at least not by the standards her teacher, Mr. Leonard Grayson, unconsciously measured his students against. She was black, quiet, not one for small talk or flattery. She never interrupted, never volunteered, never challenged. But that didn't mean she wasn't watching. She absorbed everything, every lesson, every formula, every mistake her peers made when they tried too hard to impress. Nia saw patterns in chaos, rhythm in numbers. She didn't need applause. She just needed peace. Mr. Grayson, in his pressed shirt and khaki pants, stood near the whiteboard, tapping a dry erase marker against his palm as he scrolled through his laptop. His lectures were polished but distant, almost performative. He had a teacher's smile, tight at the corners, practical. He was the kind of educator who thrived on affirmation from students like Bryce, Landon, and Cody, white boys with loud mouths and louder confidence, the ones who guessed answers instead of thinking them through, the ones who joked during lectures and got laughs instead of reprimands. Mr. Grayson called it engagement. Nia called it a double standard. She didn't hate him. Hate required energy. What she felt was something heavier, a dull, unspoken knowing that no matter how well she performed, she would never be seen the way they were. Her notebooks were filled with perfectly solved theorems and derivatives, but Miss Grayson had never once commented on her work, unless grading demanded it. No eye contact, no follow-ups, no belief. That day, as the bell rang and students settled into their seats, something shifted. "All right," Mr. Grayson said, his voice carrying just enough authority to quiet the room. "Let's warm up with something different today." He turned to the whiteboard and began writing. The markers squeaked in staccato bursts as he outlined a problem far more advanced than anything in their AP syllabus. It wasn't just difficult, it was obscure, abstract, and borderline unsolvable for high schoolers. The class leaned forward, the board filled with layered expressions, nested radicals, and an undefined variable hanging like a trapdoor. Mr. Grayson stepped back and capped the marker. "This one's special," he said, smiling with thin lips. "We used to challenge each other with this back in college. No one ever got it exactly right. It's fun, if you're into that sort of thing." He let the silence hang for a moment, then slowly scanned the room. Eyes landed on Bryce first, then Landon. But neither of them spoke. They looked confused, maybe intimidated. And then Mr. Grayson's gaze shifted, for the first time all semester, toward the back row, toward Nia. Her pen stopped mid-scribble. He tilted his head and grinned. Not kindly, not curiously, but smugly, like a magician daring someone to guess the trick. "Nia," he said, drawing out the name like a challenge he didn't expect her to take. "Why don't you give this a try?" Heads turned. She blinked. He added, "For fun." The words weren't cruel, but they carried a weight. It wasn't a request. It wasn't encouragement. It was spectacle. A subtle performance disguised as academic whimsy. The subtext was unmistakable. "Let's see what the quiet black girl can do." A few students chuckled under their breath. Not meanly, just awkwardly. Bryce smirked and whispered something to Landon. The teacher folded his arms and stepped aside. For a few seconds Nia didn't move. Her breath came slow and shallow. Her fingers gripped her pen tighter. She could feel the moment balancing on a blade. If she refused, the narrative would write itself. Too hard for her. If she tried and failed, It would confirm what Mr. Grayson likely believed all along. She doesn't belong here. But if she stood, if she solved it. She closed her notebook, slipped it into her bag, and stood up. Her sneakers squeaked slightly as she walked down the aisle. No one spoke. No one expected this. The board loomed large in front of her, symbols stretching like a puzzle across a battlefield. Mia took the marker from the tray. Her hands weren't shaking. She stared at the equation, dissecting it with her eyes. Something stirred behind them. Not anxiety, but fire. For the first time that morning, the classroom was completely silent. And Mr. Grayson, arms crossed, leaned against his desk, watching with an amused, expectant smirk. What he didn't realize, what no one realized, was that this wasn't just a math problem. It was the match. And Mia Cartwright was about to light the fuse. That morning, Mr. Grayson placed an unsolvable problem on the board, smirked, and looked directly at Mia for the first time. "Why don't you give this a try for fun?" he said. The marker felt strangely heavy in Mia's hand, as if the weight of the entire classroom had settled into the smooth plastic barrel. The board, crowded with symbols that twisted into unfamiliar patterns, seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Behind her, the room remained submerged in a kind of collective inhale, the type of silence that wasn't patient but predatory. Every pair of eyes rested on her back, waiting for gravity to pull her down. What none of them knew was that the challenge placed in front of her wasn't simply rigorous. It was designed as a trap. Mr. Grayson had built a quiet reputation for using this exact proof to expose students he deemed overconfident. During his years assisting with college interviews, he had wielded this very problem like a scalpel, cutting away the pride of candidates who walked in with too much certainty. They would crumble under its complexity, leaving him feeling justified in his own authority. The proof wasn't about mathematics. It was about power. He had never once offered it to a high school class. Yet today, he had written it out deliberately, each symbol placed like bait. It wasn't curiosity that led him to call on Mia. It was the assumption that she would fail, and that her failure would reaffirm what he had quietly believed all along. That brilliance didn't come from girls like her, especially those who never spoke, never sought attention, and never fit into the tidy boxes he trusted. Mia sensed this. She felt it in the subtle shift of the room, in the faint rustle of someone leaning forward with anticipation, in the almost imperceptible smirk that hung at the edge of Mr. Grayson's expression. Her chest tightened, not with fear of mathematics but with the realization of what this moment represented. It wasn't about solving an equation, it was about solving a narrative that had been written around her long before she stepped into that classroom. She raised the marker and let the tip hover over the first line of the problem. A quiet, controlled breath steadied her. She wasn't nervous about the task. She had seen versions of this structure before, though never this exact configuration. But mathematics had always spoken to her like a language that bypassed the world's noise, where people made assumptions, numbers made no judgments. Patterns didn't discriminate, logic didn't doubt. Math, at least, was fair. Her hand finally moved, forming the first stroke of a symbol with deliberate precision. It wasn't guesswork. It was a decision born from clarity. A few students exchanged glances, surprised by her confidence. They had been waiting for hesitation, panic, or an embarrassed retreat. Instead, they saw something unnervingly calm. As the first full line took shape, a subtle shift moved across the room. It was quiet, but undeniable, attention uncoiling into curiosity. Mr. Grayson, still leaning against his desk with arms crossed, straightened slightly. The smugness faded from his features, replaced by something more alert. It was the first crack in the expression he always wore, the first moment where he wasn't entirely sure of the outcome. Mia didn't see his reaction. She was immersed in the unfolding logic of the problem, tracing invisible paths through the structure. The board became an extension of her own mind, each symbol a stepping stone across a river of reasoning. She wrote carefully, then stepped back, narrowing her eyes as she evaluated the framework she had begun. Her movements were deliberate, precise, and unhurried. She didn't need to rush. Mathematics had its own tempo, and she knew how to follow it. Her thoughts ran deeper than the equation. Beneath the calculations lived layers of emotion, quiet frustration, old memories of being overlooked, countless moments when her intelligence had been overshadowed by louder voices in classrooms that never made space for her. She remembered teachers who praised her neatness instead of her insight, group projects where her contributions were claimed by others, counselors who suggested more realistic course loads. None of it had ever stopped her, but the accumulation had taught her how easily brilliance could be buried under silence. This moment, she realized, felt strangely familiar. Not because she had seen the problem before, but because she understood the intent behind it. She recognized the subtle shape of condescension, the quiet weaponization of expectation, and she understood, with sudden clarity, that she was not expected to rise from this moment. She was expected to shrink. Instead, she pressed forward. Behind her, the classroom stillness grew heavier. The students who initially watched for entertainment began to follow the lines she drew. A few leaned forward, tracking the unfolding logic. Others blinked rapidly, unable to process how easily the structure seemed to open beneath her reasoning. The longer she worked, the more undeniable it became. She wasn't guessing. She was solving. Mr. Grayson stepped forward, almost imperceptibly at first. Something had shifted inside him as well. Though he tried to hide it, his certainty was eroding. He watched the pattern forming on the board, recognizing the markers of a mind that was not only talented, but deeply fluent in the language of complex mathematics. And with that recognition came something he had not anticipated: unease. There was a moment, brief but telling, when he glanced toward the classroom windows, as though half expecting an interruption. A fire drill, anything to intervene before the room witnessed the unraveling of his quiet assumptions. Nothing happened. The room stayed painfully still. Naya moved to the second line, then the third. The chalkboard became a landscape of expanding logic. With each new step, the problem lost some of its menace, and instead revealed its structure like a puzzle, aligning into coherence. She stepped back again, momentarily assessing the direction she needed to take. Her heartbeat settled into a rhythmic steadiness. But something unexpected happened then, not to the problem but within the room itself. Bryce, who had been slouched in his chair with amusement curled at the corner of his mouth, suddenly sat upright. He nudged the classmate beside him, without taking his eyes off the board. His expression wasn't amusement anymore. It was something closer to irritation. The balance of attention in the room had shifted, and he felt it immediately. The spotlight, once comfortably his, was slowly rotating. He wasn't the one being admired today. Nia didn't see him, but she felt something shift, an invisible pressure, a subtle tension, a new undercurrent in the air. It wasn't fear but awareness. She realized the room wasn't only watching, it was reacting. She returned to the board and added the next step, one that required not just skill, but an understanding of the problem's structural weakness. The moment the symbol appeared, the atmosphere changed again. A wave of realization spread across the room, subtle but unmistakable. She had found the seam in the problem, the part meant to mislead, not instruct. She saw it for what it was: a trap, and she avoided it with effortless clarity. Behind her, Mr. Grayson stiffened. His posture straightened, as though pulled by an invisible string. The shift in his expression was small but significant. His confidence had fractured. Students noticed. Naya didn't. Her focus deepened, sharpened, and crystallized into something undeniable. She began filling the next lines without hesitation. She wasn't racing the clock or the room. She was simply revealing the truth hidden in the problem. For the first time all year, every single student watched her, not as background noise, not as the quiet girl in the back row, but as someone holding the center of the room with nothing except her mind. And that was when it happened. As she completed the next line, forming a connection that wasn't supposed to be reached so quickly, Mr. Grayson's expression underwent a full transformation. The arrogance evaporated. The smirk disappeared. Confusion surfaced. Slowly, then unmistakably, it was the look of a man, realizing that the thing he had believed impossible was unfolding in front of him, line by line, by the very student he had dismissed. As the first line appeared on the board, Mr. Grayson's expression shifted from arrogance to confusion. The board had never looked more alive. Symbols danced across its surface in symmetrical procession, each one breathing logic, each line building upon the last, like layers of music rising toward crescendo. Nia's hand moved with a rhythm all its own, confident but precise, fast but never careless. The marker glided as if guided by instinct, not calculation. It was no longer a classroom. It was a stage. And for the first time since she'd entered Pine Hill High, Nia Cartwright was center frame, not because she forced her way there, but because the gravity of her intellect demanded it. The room had shifted from curiosity to awe. Students who minutes earlier had exchanged smirks, now stared with still faces and wide eyes. Whispers had died. Pens hung midair. Even the usual note passers had gone silent. Each new symbol she added acted like a pin, popping preconceptions one after another. There was no longer any denying it. She knew what she was doing. And more than that, she was doing something no one else in that room, teacher included, had dared attempt. Mr. Grayson, who had initially positioned himself beside the window with his arms folded in silent smugness, had taken a few aimless steps forward. His usual steady posture wavered as he watched her from the corner of the room. There was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Not irritation, not sarcasm, but something rarer, uncertainty. It wasn't just the math he didn't recognize. It was her. All semester, Nia had been a fixture in the periphery, the quiet girl in the corner who turned in assignments without flair, never challenged, never demanded, and now, in the span of 15 surreal minutes, she had rewritten her identity in the eyes of everyone around her, including the man who had spent months deciding she wasn't worth a second glance. Nia didn't flinch under the weight of their attention. In fact, she barely noticed it. Her mind was deep inside the architecture of the proof, rearranging components like an engineer rebuilding the frame of a collapsed bridge. The trick in Grayson's equation had been clear, a misdirection early in the second expression designed to lead the solver down a path that looped endlessly. But Nia had spotted the bait and sidestepped it cleanly, constructing an alternate route that began not at the surface but at the root. Every movement now carried the power of precision. Every step pulled the curtain back, and that terrified Bryce Matthews. Seated 3 rows in front of her, he watched the room more than he watched the board. The attention Nia had captured wasn't just impressive, it was disruptive. In a classroom where he had long claimed unspoken dominance, through jokes, volume, and missed Grayson's indulgent praise, he now sat invisible. And worse, irrelevant. He had always seen Nia as forgettable, a quiet girl, a background extra. He didn't dislike her, he just didn't think of her at all. Now she was standing there with everyone watching her, like she was some kind of genius. And Bryce, with his Letterman jacket, and loud laugh, and teacher buddy privileges, had never felt smaller. His jaw tensed. Nia, meanwhile, reached the pivot point of the problem, the line that signified the beginning of the solution's unraveling. The chalk made a satisfying snap, as she struck through a variable, simplifying an expression that had confused college-level students. Her eyes narrowed as she double-checked the bridge to the next phase. No hesitation. She had already tested the framework in her mind. Her intuition had earned its trust. Around her, breathless stillness remained. Even students who didn't understand the math could feel the magnitude of what they were watching. There was elegance in her process, even if they couldn't decode the symbols themselves. She didn't just understand the answer. She was building it in real time. Mr. Grayson shifted his weight again, clearly uncomfortable now. He ran a hand along the side of his neck, his eyes locked on the board. There was no trace of the relaxed confidence he'd worn earlier. He had expected a lesson in humility, one Nia would receive quietly. Instead, he was the one being taught. And the lesson was simple. Brilliance does not ask permission. Still, pride dies slowly. He reminded himself that there were still hurdles ahead in the problem. Traps she might fall into. Complexities that might slow her down. She could still fail. He might still reclaim control. But as she finished the next segment, and turned to verify her line of reasoning, even he knew the trajectory was clear. And then Bryce made his first move. He tapped his pencil loudly, a sharp break in the silence. It didn't draw much attention, but it made Nia glance up for the first time. Their eyes met for a flicker of a second, his filled with resentment, hers unreadable. To most, the moment passed unnoticed. But to him, it was declaration. Nia turned back to the board and continued. She was now within striking distance of the conclusion, 5 or 6 lines away from the final answer. The path was narrowing, the loose ends beginning to tether together. The complexity had reduced to clarity. She'd inverted the structure, exposed the root, built a counterflow that flipped Grayson's original intention on its head. The board was nearly full now, columns of symbols wrapping across it like cascading data on a terminal. Some students were furiously writing in their notebooks, trying to preserve what they could, as if witnessing a live performance they didn't want to forget. And then, in a moment that no one saw coming, not even Nia, something shattered the silence. The fire alarm screamed to life. Its piercing wail tore through the classroom like a slash of static. Red lights pulsed at the ceiling corners. Chairs scraped as startled students jerked back in surprise. The classroom dissolved into chaos. Mr. Grayson's head snapped toward the hallway in confusion. There had been no warning, no email, no announcement of a scheduled drill. And this was second period. Drills were typically reserved for first or last. His brows furrowed. Students began rising, unsure whether to stay or evacuate. The hallway filled with muffled shouting. Lockers banged shut in the distance. But Naya didn't move. She stood frozen in front of the board, marker still in hand, just 3 lines away from the conclusion. The momentum that had been building, her moment, had been interrupted, stolen mid-sentence. Around her, voices began to rise. Some were laughing, some were already halfway to the door. But Bryce remained seated, his arms crossed tightly, his lips curled into a faint grin. He knew something no one else in the room knew. Mr. Grayson's voice cut through the confusion, ordering students to follow protocol, move to the evacuation point, and bring their belongings. The words sounded automatic, forced, like he was trying to pull the classroom back under his control. Nia stood still for one more second, staring at the nearly completed solution in front of her. Her thoughts raced, not with fear but with fury. This hadn't been coincidence. The timing was too perfect, the disruption too surgical. Someone had pulled that alarm, and her instinct screamed exactly who it was. As Nia neared the final step of the problem, the fire alarm suddenly rang, an unscheduled drill no one had warned about. The alarm's shriek rang through the corridors like a mechanical scream, bouncing off the walls and cutting through whatever clarity Nia had just summoned. Chairs scraped back, backpacks zipped, the classroom dissolved into disorder. But Nia didn't move. She stood there, just 3 lines from the final answer, staring at the board as if the ringing hadn't yet reached her consciousness. The flow was broken. The solution, so close she could taste it, now hung mid-air, suspended between brilliance and interruption. Mr. Grayson's voice cut through the confusion, sharp but uneven. He called out for students to evacuate immediately, motioning toward the hallway. His instructions came quickly, too quickly, like he'd rehearsed them. His face was tight, not with concern, but with something closer to panic and control. As the room emptied, Mia lingered. Her hands were still at her sides, the marker clutched loosely between her fingers. Her heartbeat thudded in her chest, not from fear but from calculation, a different kind than what she had been solving minutes before. This was no drill, no warning had been given, no protocol followed. The fire alarm had gone off at the precise second she approached the finish line of a problem designed to stop her. It was too perfect. She turned her head slowly, scanning the nearly empty room. Only 3 people remained. Mr. Grayson, who now stood behind his desk as if trying to reassert authority over the space. A student named Riley, who fumbled with her phone, and Bryce, who made a deliberate show of yawning before finally getting up. That yawn wasn't casual. It was calculated. Nia's eyes followed Bryce as he exited the room. His shoulders relaxed, his stride slow. Something about his body language was off, too calm, too content for a moment, so chaotic. Mr. Grayson's eyes finally landed on Nia. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look bothered. What he looked was relieved. His expression was cautious, like a man walking a tightrope between regret and strategic avoidance. He stepped toward her and motioned lightly to the board, offering a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His words were meant to be dismissive. Finish it later. Not now. Not here. Not while everyone was watching. He said it quickly, almost as if Nia didn't respond. She simply walked to the board, clicked the marker closed, and placed it neatly on the tray. Her face remained unreadable. But something behind her eyes, something that had once been muted, now burned cold and steady. In the hallway, students gathered in scattered clusters, buzzing with questions and confusion. Teachers stood outside their doors, checking attendance, but already, murmurs were building, not about the fire alarm, but about what had just happened inside room 3. She was solving it. Did you see the board? She was almost done. And then, something more pointed. Did Grayson look nervous? Nia walked past the clusters, head high, her expression stoic. Her classmates stepped aside instinctively. Not out of fear, out of recognition. She didn't speak, but she no longer needed to. By the time she reached the courtyard, the speculation had mutated into something louder. Riley, the girl who had lingered in class, was now huddled with 2 others, showing them her phone. She had recorded the moment Mr. Grayson posed the challenge, and the first few seconds of Nia solving it before the alarm interrupted. Someone else had captured a second angle. By lunch, the videos were stitched together and posted. The caption was simple. Grayson thought she couldn't do it. Then this happened. Within 2 hours, the video had spread beyond their school. By the end of the school day, it had passed 6,000 views. Nia sat alone at her lunch table, headphones in, food untouched. Her phone buzzed constantly in her pocket, notifications piling up like static she refused to check. She didn't care about the views. She cared about the interruption. That alarm hadn't saved anyone from danger. It had saved a narrative from collapse. It had stopped her from finishing the answer that would have rewritten every quiet assumption. This school had held about her since the first day she walked into that room. She thought back to the way Bryce had smirked, to the way Mr. Grayson had looked relieved. Not surprised. It wasn't proof. But it was enough to know this was no coincidence. After school, she rode home in silence. Her earbuds played low instrumental music, the same playlist she always listened to when solving problems. Only today, she wasn't solving equations. She was solving intent. That night, the video crossed 11, but more important than the views was the comment thread. It began innocuously. Kids from school chiming in, some praising her, some still skeptical. But then a comment popped up under a throwaway username. Grayson used that same problem on my brother 4 years ago. White student. He walked out defeated. Same thing. Fake fun challenge. He does this on purpose. A few likes appeared under the comment. Then someone else added their own. My cousin went to Pine Hill. Said Grayson always gave the hardest problems to the quiet black kids, never the white ones. A third. He gave me that problem junior year. I failed it. My GPA dropped. Funny how it's always the same group he tests for fun. The thread began to spiral. Anecdotes, hints, patterns. It wasn't hard data, but it was a story repeating itself in different names, across different years. Each story was a brick in a wall that had been invisible. Until now. And then, an unexpected twist. A user uploaded a screenshot from the school's outdated staff manual. It included a note from Grayson on critical thinking drills. One of them, marked with an asterisk, was the exact problem Nia had nearly solved. Another user traced the timestamp of the fire alarm against public records. There had been no scheduled drill, no maintenance, no false alarm reported. It had been pulled manually. The conversation shifted again, from admiration to something colder, sharper. Not just she's a genius, but this was sabotage. Nia sat at her desk, finally reading through the thread. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. What she felt was deeper, the strange electric sensation of clarity unfolding. This hadn't been about one problem, or one classroom. This was about something systemic and practiced. The sabotage had a pattern. It had a script, and she had interrupted it. For years they had built systems of silence, trusting that kids like her would fold under pressure or disappear into invisibility. But today she had cracked that system open with logic, precision, and presence. And someone had panicked. But Nia wasn't finished. She copied the entire thread, saved the video, took screenshots of every comment. She began organizing it like a research project, indexing the stories, timestamping the moments, tagging the names. If they wanted to play smart, they'd chosen the wrong opponent. Because this time the proof wouldn't be mathematical. It would be personal. That night, the video hit 11,000 views, and a comment thread began exposing something much deeper. The moment the video of the chalkboard erupted online, something inside Nia Cartwright shifted. She had expected a ripple, a few classmates maybe sharing or whispering. Instead, she found herself at the center of a storm. As she watched the numbers climb, thousands, then tens of thousands, her phone vibrated incessantly. Notifications flooded in. Friends she knew, friends she barely recognized, professors she had never met. Many of them simply wrote, "Wow." Some typed hard I, but beneath the surface of praise lay something darker. She solved it. At least she tried. No way a girl like that cracked it. Affirmative action genius. Comments appeared with brutal speed, a tidal wave of sentiment skewering the positive and the poisonous. At first, Nia scrolled numbly, fingers trembling. Each message felt like a mirror held up to everything she had lived through. The invisibility, the expectation that she stay small, quiet, background. One comment stabbed sharper than the rest. "Give it up. She'll never belong." Her stomach lurched, but she kept scrolling because she had to see it. Because halfway through the year she'd stopped expecting someone else to show up for her. She'd started showing up for herself. Meanwhile, Behind the scenes, something else was quietly happening. A former student of Mr. Leonard Grayson, anonymous, bold, created a new thread on the forum of the school's alumni site. It began innocuously. Does anyone else remember this teacher giving impossible tests? But it didn't stay innocuous for long. One by one, voices joined. He refused my rec letter. He told me I lacked discipline. He only recommended the white kids who spoke up. Each story piled on the next, until the thread was a dam bursting open. Through the screen, Nia read names she had never heard, years she hadn't attended. Still it felt personal. Because in every story she recognized the pattern: brilliance ignored, silent potential ridiculed, ambition punished with invisibility. The forum thread exploded. Screenshots of graded papers, emails with rubrics and comments, even a scanned form with a teacher's name crossed out and replaced with more vocal students, circulated. It was no longer just about Nia's chalk lines on the board. It was about every quiet student who had learned to defer their hand, to blend into the back row, to hope if they were invisible enough they'd be spared. But they weren't spared. The silent injustice had long been the curriculum in that classroom. And now that it was out, there was nowhere to hide. The school's name itself became a tag. News outlets started linking to the thread. Math professors from other states retweeted Nia's proof. And then posted comments. This is beautiful. She sees something we teach in grad school. A few op-eds appeared. When excellence goes unseen, the hidden curriculum of racial bias in schools. Nia felt the weight of it all. Pride, fear, determination pulled together in one expanding universe of attention. But with that attention came threats. Her social media DMs filled with mixture. You're lying. Prove it's yours. You only got this because they felt sorry for you. She ignored most, but the ones phrased as jokes cut deeper. Glad the token finally got the spotlight, read one. She pressed delete, but the words lingered. The same system that had kept her silent on paper and in class now bombarded her with noise she didn't invite. Her phone buzzed at midnight. Anonymous tag alerts, hacked accounts pretending to be her, fake transcripts posted, all intended to destabilize. At school, the atmosphere changed. Some students approached her, speaking quietly. That was amazing. Others avoided her gaze. The teacher's favorite, Bryce, the football player, didn't just avoid her. He stared. His smirk had become sharper, more calculating. She noticed him whispering in the halls, glancing at his phone, sharing something with others. She couldn't hear the words, but she felt the intention. The shift in power, even if subtle, rattled her. This wasn't the quiet back row anymore. The back row was watching. Then the leak happened. A digital screenshot of the agenda for the upcoming meeting of the school board appeared on a private message board. The document's header read, Emergency Conversation, Mr. L. Grayson. The agenda items: review of faculty conduct, student bias complaints, confidential interview protocol, risk assessment, reputational damage. The leak spread faster than Nia could blink. In her mind she put the pieces together. The online thread, the viral video, the board meeting, the moment the school could no longer pretend, the moment the silent injustice fought back. Inside her house that evening, Nia sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, the blue glow lighting her face. Her mother placed a plate of food beside her, but she barely touched it. Her father cleared his throat and said, "Whatever happens, we're proud of you." Nia nodded, tears gathering, and said softly, "This is bigger than me now." Her brother peeked in, asked, "You okay?" She forced a smile, closed the laptop and stood. "Fine," she said. But fine felt brittle. Outside the wind picked up. Leaves rustled against the window like the voices of the countless students who'd been ignored. As night deepened, Nia's phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number. "You think you won? Wait till you see what else we found." She stilled. Her heart pounded. She looked at the screen, then at the folder of screenshots she had compiled. Emails, student evaluations, years of erasure wrapped in digital evidence. The only question was, would anyone believe them? And if they did, what then? Then the call came. Her father's phone rang. It was a blocked number. His face went pale. He hung up and turned to Nia. "They want to meet tomorrow morning." Nia's breath caught. She asked, "Who?" Her father swallowed. "The school board." Her mind raced, heart hammered. This was the moment. The moment the system could finally look her in the eye, but also the moment it could close its doors again. She exhaled slowly, fixed her gaze on the window. Outside, the city lights glowed, as if watching back. And then she read the agenda. The page with her name redacted. The bullet point. Impact on student confidentiality maintained. She knew what that meant. She felt the tension coil in her chest. They were going to talk about her. But more than that, they were going to decide what happens next. The injustice that began in a classroom in suburban North Carolina was now at the brink of becoming something much bigger. She closed her laptop and stood, hands trembling, and walked upstairs. In the darkness of her room, she whispered to no one, "I'm ready." But she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming. The school board called Mr. Grayson in for an emergency conversation, and someone leaked the agenda. The school board's leaked agenda rippled through the internet, like gasoline on fire. While most eyes focused on the words emergency conversation, Mia Cartwright zoomed in on something far more alarming. Prior faculty complaints closed with insufficient evidence. She stared at the screen, rereading it until the words blurred. This wasn't a new story. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern that had been quietly swept aside for years. And now, suddenly, the school wanted her version. Mia arrived at the administrative building, flanked by her father, a local accountant, known for his calm demeanor, and her mother, who hadn't stopped praying since the video hit the internet. The building, usually quiet and sterile, buzzed with an unfamiliar energy. A receptionist with tight lips and darting eyes handed them lanyards without a smile. "Room 304, she said, avoiding eye contact. Inside, the conference room felt colder than the November air outside. 3 individuals sat behind a table. Principal Vickers, District Representative Ms. Lowell, and a man in a navy suit who introduced himself only as legal counsel. Their voices were soft, their words polite, but the arrangement made one thing clear. Mia wasn't there for support. She was there to be examined. "We just want to hear your side," Ms. Lowell began, her voice oozing practiced neutrality. But the tone felt wrong, like they'd already written the outcome, and just needed Mia to read her part. She straightened her spine. "I think you've already heard it," Mia said. "It's in the video." They exchanged glances. Principal Vickers cleared his throat. "We're aware of the footage, Mia, but context is key. Were you coached in any way? Did anyone assist you with that solution?" There it was, the assumption beneath the smile. Mia's stomach clenched. "No," she said, her voice firm. "That work is mine. Every line, every step." They nodded politely, as if indulging a child's fantasy. Then the man in the navy suit asked, "Do you understand the pressure this has put on the school?" Her father leaned forward. With respect, the pressure didn't come from her solving an equation. It came from what was already broken. The silence that followed was stiff. The air hung heavy with unsaid things. Afterward, the school counselor called Mia in alone. Miss Turner, who once complimented her quietly in the hallway, but rarely looked up when Bryce spoke over her in class, now wore an expression of forced concern. "This is all moving very fast," she said, placing her palms on her desk. "You have a future to think about, Mia. If I were you, I'd let this pass. Don't push too hard. People don't like waves." Mia blinked, stunned. "Are you asking me to stay quiet?" "I'm asking you to stay safe," Miss Turner replied. "For your own good." But the time for silence had expired. That night, Mia went home and opened her laptop. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She flipped to the exact page in her notebook where she had first scribbled the skeleton of that equation. The one Mr. Grayson had thrown on the board to humiliate her. The one she'd been halfway through solving, when the fire alarm interrupted everything. She opened her phone camera and hit record. The room was quiet but charged. Her walls were lined with honor roll certificates, a mathlete trophy from sophomore year, and a printed photo of her late grandmother, who had always told her, "Your mind is a weapon, baby. Keep it loaded." Mia exhaled. With calm precision, she picked up her marker and walked to the whiteboard her parents had installed for her years ago, a gift when her teachers refused to recommend her for the gifted program. Line by line, she rewrote the problem, starting from scratch. Every symbol, every curve, every variable was narrated, not just explained but owned. Her voice was steady but warm. She wasn't trying to prove herself. She was reclaiming something's space, truth, dignity. Her handwriting looped with quiet defiance. And for the first time, she wasn't doing it for a grade. She was doing it for herself. 43 minutes later, the final line was complete. She boxed the answer in red and capped her marker. She turned to the camera. "My name is Mia Cartwright. I'm 16 years old. And I solved it, not for fun. for survival. She uploaded the video and went to sleep. By morning, everything had changed. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Thousands of comments. Tens of thousands. Then hundreds. TikTok stitched reactions. Professors reposted it. A retired MIT mathematician called it the most elegant real-time proof I've seen from a high school student in a decade. But the real shift came in the form of an email. From a university. Subject, we saw your video. The body was brief. We would love to speak. No application required. Nia stared at the screen, blinking, stunned. But not everyone was celebrating. A second video began circulating. Grainy hallway footage showing Nia walking into the admin office. Over it, someone had added a voiceover. This is what you get when you pull the race card. The post gained traction. Bots swarmed her social media. A new rumor surfaced, that her proof was actually plagiarized from a college paper. Bryce's friends whispered it in the halls. Anonymous accounts shared a falsified comparison document. Then came the twist. A student from another school, miles away, uploaded a private Google Drive link. Inside were scans of complaints filed against Mr. Grayson from 2 years prior. One was from a girl named Kayla Simmons, now in community college. Her handwriting was looped and angry. The document detailed how Mr. Grayson had failed her despite near-perfect scores, citing lack of leadership. Another came from a boy named Trevor Green, who wrote how Grayson refused to recommend him because he lacked the polish for elite spaces. Both students were black. The school had buried the documents, marked them as addressed internally. Now, they were public. Nia's parents read them in silence, their faces a mixture of horror and confirmation. We're not the first, Nia whispered. Her father looked at her, eyes shining. But you might be the last if we do this right. She gathered the documents, printed the scans, and created a file. She labeled it The Silent Years. Then she recorded one more video, not of math this time, but of truth. She laid the documents on camera, one by one, narrating each story. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She let the truth speak. Mr. Grayson wasn't an anomaly, she said. He was a symptom of something schools like this protect. But not anymore. She hit upload. The view count broke 6 figures by dusk. News outlets reached out. Education activists shared it. A lawyer emailed and offered pro bono representation. The school board's website crashed under traffic. And then came the cliffhanger. Nia walked into her room exhausted and checked her laptop. Her inbox had a new message. Subject response required. Your video has triggered a formal review. She clicked. Inside was a single line. The investigation is active. We need a meeting. Tomorrow. Urgent. And below it a strange attachment. It was a PDF. Untitled. She opened it. Inside was a scan of Mr. Grayson's original teaching file, with sections blacked out, but one thing clearly visible. Red flag pattern of discretion, with minority students. Monitor closely. It had been in his record all along. They had known. Nia uploaded the full proof in a single take. It went viral overnight. The day after Nia Cartwright uploaded her full solution, the world felt like it had cracked open. She'd woken up to 3 million views. It wasn't just high school kids sharing a video. It was tenured mathematicians from MIT analyzing her logic step by step on YouTube. It was a Stanford professor tweeting, "Who is this young woman and how do we support her brilliance?" It was anonymous internet users writing manifestos about the erasure of black excellence in gifted programs, citing Nia as proof of what had been hidden all along. And for a few hours, maybe a day, Nia felt seen in a way she never had before. But with every rise comes the shadows. By sunset, her phone had become an emotional landmine. The same video that made her a national headline had also drawn out trolls, racists, and doubters in droves. Her comment sections were filled with fire emojis and hateful vitriol in equal measure. Affirmative action wonder girl. No way she did that alone. Plant. She's lying. She memorized someone else's work. The praise felt like wind. The hate felt like weight. Inside her bedroom, Nia scrolled in silence. Her younger brother sat cross-legged on the floor, watching cartoons, oblivious. Her mother had stopped reading the comments 2 days ago. Her father had started printing the threats, not to read them, but to document them. This is proof, he said quietly, that the story matters. Nia tried to stay steady. She reminded herself, over and over, that attention wasn't the goal. Truth was. But still, every alert made her pulse quicken. Every stranger's comment had the potential to sink into her ribs. Then it got worse. Whispers began circulating at school. Bryce, the football player, Grayson's favorite, had planted the seed. During lunch, Mia overheard him talking near the vending machines. She got help. That's what they're saying, he said loudly enough to be overheard. His tone casual but aimed. You know, tutors or whatever. There's no way she did that herself. Nobody solves a problem like that without help. His friends laughed. Someone mumbled, maybe AI wrote it, and they all snorted. By the next day, the whisper had bloomed into a full narrative. Mia cheated. It didn't come in one blow. It came in sideways glances, group chats she wasn't in. A sudden chill in the hallways. A rumor this powerful didn't need proof. It only needed repetition. In class, Mr. Grayson returned to teaching like nothing had happened. He didn't mention the video. He didn't look at her. But Mia noticed how he now avoided calling on her completely. It wasn't silence anymore. It was a deliberate freeze-out. And the students followed his lead. The same classmates who had once whispered wow under their breath when she picked up the chalk now whispered something else. She rehearsed it. She's playing everyone. And then the unimaginable happened. Mia's student record, confidential files, grades, attendance reports was leaked online. Someone had hacked the school system and released a screenshot showing one of her sophomore year math grades. A B+ in geometry. Gifted, a caption mocked. Really? Her middle school standardized scores were attached. A subpar PSAT score. A missing extracurricular form. Suddenly, strangers had access to her entire academic history, stripped of context, weaponized to fit a single goal: discredit her. She sat frozen at her desk, staring at her laptop. The room was dim, the ceiling fan spinning above her like a clock ticking down. Her hands trembled. "This isn't fair," she whispered, barely audible. Her mom placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's never been fair. That's why it matters." Mia didn't cry. She didn't have time to. Because as the screenshots spread, a new wave of comments flooded in. "She's not even that smart." That her parents pulled strings. "This is why they don't belong in AP." Even her race became a target. Slurs wrapped in sarcasm, jokes layered in bigotry. And the worst part? Some of the accounts looked like they were from her own school. She pulled out her phone and checked her college application portal. She'd applied to 6 schools. 3 had already marked her as accepted for review. She clicked on her top choice. The status had changed. Application under further review pending documentation. Her breath hitched. "What does that mean?" she asked aloud. Her father took the laptop from her, reading the message twice. "It means someone called them," he said, voice low. "Or sent them something." An email arrived moments later from the school. "Due to new information provided to the admissions office, your file is being temporarily re-evaluated. Please allow time for administrative review." Mia stared at the screen, chest tight. Her accomplishments weren't just being questioned, they were being dismantled. That night, the lights stayed on in her house, until after midnight. Her mother called the school board. Her father emailed the admissions department, attaching links to the video, the solution, the public support from academics, and Nia. She sat at her desk silent. She felt exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated, not just criticized, but dissected. Her intelligence was no longer hers. It had become public property, up for scrutiny. The joy she'd felt solving that equation. The pride she'd carried, buried beneath bureaucracy. That was when the unexpected twist hit. An anonymous email slid into her inbox. Subject line: "They've done it before." The body contained a single paragraph. "You're not the first." Grayson's had other students marked as under review by calling colleges himself. Check the name Darian Michaels, class of 2017. Same pattern. He made the call. He always makes the call. Attached was a scan of a college rejection letter, with a note scribbled at the bottom: "Due to conflicting teacher evaluations." Mia's heart pounded. She opened a new tab and searched Darian Michaels, Oak Ridge High School. Up came an old blog post. "How my teacher cost me my future." Written 5 years ago. Buried on page 4 of Google. But every word mirrored hers. Same accusations. Same erasure. Same outcome. Nia closed her eyes. Grayson hadn't just doubted her. He was actively working against her. And if he'd done it before, he'd do it again. Nia's college application portal lit up. One of her early decisions was suddenly marked as under review. The word review lingered in the back of Nia's throat like smoke that wouldn't clear. Her early college decision, once a beacon, had turned into a warning sign. But before she could process the implications, the school responded. And their response was silence, wrapped in platitudes. The official statement was posted to the district website the next morning. It featured no names, no acknowledgement of the viral video, the hacked records, or the accusations against Mr. Grayson. Instead, it was 3 paragraphs of carefully choreographed language. Oak Ridge High School values all students and is committed to providing a safe and equitable learning environment. We recognize that conversations around diversity in academic spaces are ongoing and vital. We consider this a learning opportunity to reflect on how we can better uplift diverse voices in education. Nia read it twice, barely breathing. There was no mention of the racial harassment, no reference to the hacking, the leaked files, or the multiple students who had spoken out about Mr. Grayson. No accountability, no truth, and most critically, no mention of her. The girl who had sparked a national conversation was now being airbrushed out of her own story. In the days that followed, teachers were instructed not to address online content in class. Students were told to avoid social media discussions to protect the school's image. Nia noticed classroom posters being quietly taken down, especially the ones featuring student names and accomplishments. The senior achievements wall, which had included her name under most likely to innovate, was suddenly blank. Policy update, one administrator said when asked. But it didn't feel like policy. It felt like erasure. Mr. Grayson, meanwhile, remained employed. He stopped assigning advanced problems. He returned to the curriculum, as though the chalkboard challenge had never happened. He even began calling on Nia, again, but only for minor questions, the ones anyone could answer. Just to be inclusive, he said with a tight smile. The sarcasm cut sharper than a slur, and the students followed his lead. They didn't say her name anymore. They looked through her in the hallway. The same people who had once clapped under their breath now returned to indifference, because indifference was safer, quieter. Even the counselors shifted tone. "We think it would be helpful for you to take some time off," Ms. Turner suggested one afternoon. "Not as a punishment, just to let things cool down." Nia stared at her. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, honey," the counselor replied, with the kind of smile reserved for patients, not students. "But your presence is polarizing right now. It was the sanitized version of your making people uncomfortable." Nia walked out without replying. At home, the silence was heavier. Her father began locking the mailbox. Her mother unplugged the landline. Anonymous letters had started arriving, some praising, others threatening. A few envelopes had no return address and contained just screenshots of her grades. One morning, her little brother asked, "Did you break the school?" She froze. "No, baby," she said. "I told the truth. They just don't like how loud it sounded." Still, she wondered, had it all been worth it? That night, as the house quieted, Nia sat alone on the porch, wrapped in her hoodie. She clutched her notebook, the one with the original proof. Her eyes drifted to the blank pages she hadn't touched since the leak. The air was cold, but something else made her shiver. A creeping fear that this system didn't just resist change. It absorbed it, diluted it, neutralized it until the spark vanished. And maybe she was next. The doorbell rang. Her father answered. A voice said, "Local press. We're not recording. We'd just like to talk." Nia came to the door, expecting a mic, a camera, a pushy journalist. Instead, she saw a woman with kind but wary eyes, holding a folder, no camera in sight. "I'm Dana Ross. Channel 8. We've been following your story," she said. "Off the record, we just received something. An anonymous folder." Nia's breath caught. "What kind of folder?" The reporter hesitated, then lowered her voice. "It's about your teacher, and it's not just student complaints anymore." Her father stepped forward. "You mean there's more?" Dana nodded slowly. "It's personnel files. Internal memos. One of our staff used to work with the district legal team. It's real, and someone wanted you to see it before the board buries it." Nia's pulse raced. She took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were copies of district memos, confidential annotations, blacked out lines with enough legible content to make her stomach turn. One line stood out. "Repeat behavioral concerns. Prioritization of dominant group students. Recommend peer shadowing to offset perception." Another. "Caution advised. In using Grayson as recommendation source. 3 flag discrepancies reported in recent admissions cycle." A note scribbled in the margin. "Watchdog group inquiry pending. No response required. It was all there. Not just complaints, but internal acknowledgement. The administration had known. They had chosen to do nothing. Nia looked up, stunned. You need to make this public, Dana said softly, but carefully. They're already circling the wagons. Her mother stood behind her now, hands pressed together. Her father whispered, "This could change everything." Nia nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Then let's change everything." That night, Nia scanned the documents, uploading them to an encrypted drive. She shared the link with 3 national education reporters, and the same lawyer who'd offered to represent her pro bono. She drafted a new post. Simple and clear. They knew. They ignored. They silenced. Not anymore. She included the folder link. Hit post. Within hours, they knew trended. National coverage reignited. The folder was picked up by major outlets. News anchors debated it. Op-eds flooded in. But the school board's response was faster this time. Not an apology, but in damage control. They released a new statement. They called it unfounded, taken out of context, a misunderstanding of internal review processes. And then they announced an upcoming listening session for parents. Not a hearing. Not an investigation. Just a listening session. A performance. Nia didn't attend, but others did. Parents, alumni, former students, even 2 past staffers showed up. One spoke into the mic. "We told you about Grayson in 2014. You said he was under observation. He got a bonus instead." The room fell silent. Someone recorded it. The clip went viral. The board went quiet again. The district page was temporarily taken down for maintenance. But Nia didn't stop. She was already on her next move. Because the whitewashing had failed. And truth had color now. Bold, undeniable, and louder than ever. The reporter leaned in and said, "Off the record, we just received an anonymous folder. You need to see this." Nia's hands trembled as she flipped through the folder. Dana Ross had passed her the night before. Each page felt heavier than the last, not because of its weight, but because of its contents. Inside were the names of Black students spanning over a decade. Each entry was painfully familiar in its pattern. Not a single one accused Mr. Grayson of shouting or using slurs. Instead, they described the quieter cruelty, subtle grade reductions, vague comments and recommendation letters, being left off of leadership roles in class group projects, or mysteriously being overlooked for academic opportunities. Some had complained formally. Most hadn't. But their stories, handwritten, emailed, or transcribed from interviews, had found their way into this file. There was a girl from 2012. "He told me I wasn't competitive enough for the AP exam, even though I had the highest average." A boy from 2016. "He said I was too impulsive to represent the school in the math Olympiad." Another from 2019. "I had a full ride to Princeton. He wrote a lukewarm letter that made it seem like I plagiarized my own application essay." Some had transferred schools. Others had dropped the AP track completely. A few never pursued college at all. This wasn't just a moment. It wasn't even just a teacher. It was a legacy, and Nia was now its inheritor. She printed out copies, organized them into a presentation binder, and labeled it, "The Dossier of the Silenced." The next morning, Nia stood outside the school board building, in a blazer 2 sizes too big, borrowed from her mother, with her father beside her. His jaw was clenched. Her mother prayed silently, in the car. When they entered the boardroom, the chill was immediate. The same faces from her earlier conversation were there. Principal Vickers, Ms. Lowell, and the district legal counsel. But this time, there were more. A superintendent, a media liaison, a quiet man in the corner typing aggressively into a laptop. She laid the folder on the table with deliberate calm. "I'm submitting this for formal review," she said. "I want it on the record." Lowell glanced at the label and froze. She didn't touch it. Principal Vickers cleared his throat. "Nia, we appreciate your persistence, but we must remind you that unverified claims—" "These are verified," Nia interrupted. "Names, years, specific outcomes. Some of them filed complaints you dismissed." The room shifted. The district lawyer leaned forward. "Do you understand what you're implying by bringing this here?" Nia nodded. "I understand exactly what I'm implying." A long silence stretched, uncomfortable and electric. Then, Lowell spoke again, more softly this time. "You need to be careful, Nia. Documents like these, they don't just hurt reputations, they ruin lives." She leaned in. "Including yours." Nia stared back, unflinching. Some of these lives were already ruined. I'm just shining a light. The lawyer scribbled something on a notepad. Vickers adjusted his tie. Nobody touched the folder. They didn't thank her. They dismissed her. As she and her father walked back to the car, Nia tried to hold herself together. But when the door shut behind them, she finally let her head fall against the seat. They don't care, she whispered. Her father placed a hand on hers. No, he said, voice steady. But now they can't pretend they didn't know. That night she posted a new message online. A decade of silence. 31 names. The system knew. I gave them the proof. Now we wait to see what they'll do with it. The response was immediate. Thousands of shares. A trending hashtag, dossier of the silenced. Former students began reaching out publicly. I'm one of the names. He did it to me too. Grayson blocked my rec letter in 2015. My counselor said I wasn't institutional material. One message hit harder than the rest. He told me I was too urban for AP Calculus. I dropped the class. I've regretted it every year since. The stories poured in. Some from within her state. Others from across the country. The pattern was no longer rumor. It was architecture. The next day, the local paper published an editorial. Oak Ridge's hidden history. 1 student, 31 stories, and a decade of damage. In the comments, a school board member anonymously replied, "This isn't the full story. The truth is more complicated." It always was when power was being challenged. Then came the unexpected twist. Her father came home early from work. He didn't speak as he placed his keys on the table. His face was pale, distant. Nia's mother looked up from the kitchen. "What's wrong?" He sat down slowly. "They've suspended me." "What?" Nia jumped from her chair. "Why?" He slid a letter across the table. It was from the accounting firm where he'd worked for 15 years. The language was carefully worded. Due to recent public association with legal and reputational risk exposure, your employment is being placed under temporary review pending internal investigation. Her mother clutched the counter to stay upright. "They're targeting us now." Nia's eyes burned. "They can't do that. You didn't do anything." Her father's voice cracked for the first time in days. "I did. I stood beside you." That night, Nia sat alone in her room. The walls seemed smaller. Outside, protesters began gathering again, not with signs this time, but with candles. A silent vigil outside the school building. Students, parents, alumni. One held a sign that read, "We are the Another, Justice Nail silence. But inside her house, silence pressed against her chest like weight. She opened her laptop. Another email notification flashed. This time, it was from the State Department of Education. Subject: review request acknowledged. Official hearing date to be scheduled. Attached was a formal document. Her dossier had been forwarded to the state level. Not just internal review now. State oversight. The fight had gone higher, but the cost had gone deeper. She closed the laptop, walked to her father's room, and stood at the door. He looked up from his chair, tired. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "You told the truth. That's never something to be sorry for." And yet, the consequences were becoming personal. The phone rang. Unknown number. Her mother answered. Her face went pale again. She handed Nia the receiver. A voice on the other end. Clipped. Corporate. Cold. "This is HR from the district. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding your recent conduct." "What conduct?" Nia asked. "Allegations of defamation. Possible violation of the Student Code of Digital Ethics. We'll need to speak before your next class attendance." They were coming for her too. That evening, Nia's father's job was abruptly suspended, pending review. The truth was supposed to set something free. That's what Nia Cartwright had always believed. But in the weeks following the release of the dossier, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like siege. Her family's mailbox began overflowing with more than mail. Anonymous letters appeared, many without postage. Some simply read, "Know your place." Others were more creative. Newspaper clippings with her face circled in red. An unmarked envelope filled with printed tweets from her critics, phrases like ungrateful and attention seeker underlined in ink. One envelope contained a single word, liar. All caps, no return address. At first, Nia's parents tried to shield her. Her mother would intercept the mail early, sort the worst into a locked drawer. Her father doubled the locks, installed security cameras, even taught her younger brother how to call for help in emergencies. But the attacks became harder to contain. Someone slashed the tires of her mother's car in broad daylight. in their driveway. The mechanic who came to replace them looked away when her mother asked if he'd seen anything suspicious. Nia's younger brother, usually bright-eyed and energetic, came home from school quieter than usual. When asked what was wrong, he shrugged. Later that night, he confessed. Some kids called me a liar's brother. Said we just want free college. He'd cried in the bathroom at recess. Nia's breath caught in her throat. The guilt sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't swallow. They're just scared, she whispered to him, brushing his hair back. They lash out when they see someone break the rules they've always believed in. But I didn't do anything, he whispered back. Neither had she. And yet the system remained unmoved. Mr. Grayson still stood at the front of his classroom, calm and unbothered, his chalkboard now stripped of any advanced problems. His lesson plans were back to basics, his posture tighter, but his power intact. Bryce still smirked when he passed her in the hallway. Sometimes he made a show of holding open doors for her. Ladies first, he'd sneer. Once he dropped his backpack, and when Nia instinctively reached to help, he pulled it back. Wouldn't want to get accused of sabotage. The administration remained silent. There were no town halls, no follow-ups, no apology. The problem had been solved on the board, but not in the building. And that's when Nia made the decision that would change everything. She filed a public lawsuit. The day she walked into the attorney's office, the air felt different, thick with possibility and danger. The office belonged to Monique Ellis, a civil rights attorney known for taking on impossible school equity cases, the kind of woman who'd been called angry on the news but revered in the courtroom. Monique listened without interrupting, as Nia explained everything, from the chalkboard challenge to the fire alarm, from the online harassment to the leaked records. She showed her the dossier, the letters, the slashed tires. When Nia finished, Monique leaned back in her chair, nodding slowly. You've got enough for 3 lawsuits, she said. We'll start with one. Nia's parents were hesitant, not because they didn't support her, but because they understood what was coming. Lawsuits meant depositions, public records, discovery, retaliation. But silence was no longer survivable. So Nia signed. Within days, local media ran the headline, "Student Files Discrimination Lawsuit Against Oak Ridge School District." The article was brief but packed a punch. It mentioned the alleged patterns of racial bias, the now public dossier, and the teacher still employed, despite mounting evidence. The school board's response was immediate, not an apology, but in legal muscle. Their district attorney filed a motion claiming the accusations were inflammatory, the documents illegally obtained, and the student misguided by outside influence. But they underestimated one thing: how many voices were ready to speak now that someone else had gone first. In the week that followed, Nia's legal team received 24 affidavits from former students. Some had left Oak Ridge 10 years ago. Others had only graduated last spring. All of them told the same story. A system that protected the reputation of one man at the expense of dozens of dreams. One former student wrote, "He told me not to bother applying to Duke, said the admissions office didn't like my kind. I thought he meant my GPA. Now I know he didn't." Another wrote, "I still have the letter he refused to sign. It cost me a scholarship. That letter's in a drawer next to my rejection." Still, the pressure on Nia grew thicker. An anonymous caller phoned the school and claimed she had plagiarized her junior year science project. The project, about predictive analytics in weather patterns, was one of the few that had won regional recognition. It had nothing to do with math. But suddenly, an internal inquiry was opened. Her school email account was locked for security verification. Her brother was pulled out of class twice in one day for wellness checks. Her father still hadn't been reinstated. And her mother, ever the quiet warrior, started keeping a bat in the trunk of her car. But they didn't back down. Monique filed the lawsuit, with names: Nia's, Grayson's, the principal's, and the superintendent's. It wasn't a sealed document. It was public, deliberately so. Because some truths can't live behind closed doors. The court date was set. Nia woke early that morning, dressing slowly, her hands shaking slightly as she buttoned her blouse. She didn't wear anything flashy. Just the blazer again, now tailored to fit. Outside, a small crowd had already gathered by the courthouse. Some held signs, "We stand with Nia." Others just stood in silence, watching the door. When she stepped out of the car, the cameras snapped to life. Flash, flash, click. Reporters shouted questions. "Do you believe the district will settle? Are you seeking damages or accountability?" What message are you trying to send? Nia didn't respond. Because she wasn't here to speak. She was here to show. As she approached the courthouse steps, the unexpected happened. Doors opened behind her, and one by one, former students began to step out from the crowd. Some walked slowly, nerves visible. Others walked with purpose. A girl from the class of 2011. A boy who dropped out in 2017. A woman now in grad school, who once sat in the back of Grayson's class, just like Nia. All of them were there, some holding folders, others holding nothing but truth. And behind them, more. By the time Nia reached the courthouse doors, the crowd had become a line, not of protest, but of testimony. A movement in motion, a reckoning. The courthouse cameras captured Nia, walking in. Behind her, a line of former students ready to testify. The courtroom looked nothing like Nia Cartwright expected, not grand or dramatic, but clinical. Pale walls, faded wood, the seal of the state mounted behind the judge's bench. It smelled faintly of dust and old paper, like an archive of stories that were never told. But today, the silence would be broken. The judge entered promptly, his robes rustling like thunder in a room trying too hard to pretend it wasn't shaking. Monique Ellis stood beside Nia, at the plaintiff's table, her expression steeled, eyes alert. On the defense side, the district had assembled a fortress, 3 attorneys, 2 laptops, and a stack of printed exhibits meant to drown truth in procedure. And in the seat behind the defense table sat Mr. Leonard Grayson. He wore a gray suit, a red tie, and the same smirk he wore in class, but thinner now, stretched tight across a face that looked a little less sure. He didn't look at Nia, not once. The trial began. Monique opened with a tone that cut through the courtroom like a scalpel. This case is not about math, she said. It's about erasure. About a system that quietly closed its doors to certain students over and over again, while pretending the lights were always on. She introduced the dossier, the witnesses, the pattern. The defense countered with calm indifference. This is a misunderstanding, their lead counsel said. A brilliant student, yes, but misguided. Encouraged by outside forces, fueled by online attention. This lawsuit is a misinterpretation of mentorship. Then the testimony began. One by one, former students were called to the stand. They came from all over, alumni who had waited years to speak their truth. Some were nervous, others defiant, but each one echoed the same chorus. He told me I wasn't Ivy material. He gave me a BS and said it was a gift. He laughed when I said I wanted to major in physics. Each voice was a brick in the wall they were building around Grayson's credibility. But still, he denied everything. When he took the stand, he was polished. I treat every student the same, he said, eyes locked forward. Race has never been a factor in my evaluations. Monique leaned in. Do you recognize the name Kayla Simmons? He blinked. I do. She was in my class and she alleges you blocked her from AP Physics. I made a professional recommendation. And Trevor Green? You told him he wasn't polished enough for college applications. I don't recall saying that. 31 students, Mr. Grayson. 31. And not one white student among them. Isn't that strange? He didn't answer. Then came Bryce. He was confident, cocky even, as he walked to the stand in a tailored blazer, the kind of student who still believed he was invincible.
Did Nia Cartwright solve the problem on the board? Monique asked.
Bryce smirked. I mean, she tried, but I heard she got help. Online or something. You heard? Yeah, I mean a problem like that? No way she did it alone. And who told you that? I saw people talking about it. Monique raised an eyebrow. So you're testifying under oath based on online rumors? He shifted in his seat. I just think it's suspicious. And yet, experts confirmed the solution was flawless. Bryce stayed quiet. The defense tried to shift the narrative. They questioned Nia's transcript, pointing to the 1B+ in geometry from years earlier. They brought up her hacked academic file, claiming it raised questions about consistency. They even called in a psychologist to testify about math anxiety and how certain students under pressure may perform above average, but remain statistically average long-term. Translation. Nia was a fluke. Then came the experts. One after another, professional mathematicians, black, white, Latino, women, men took the stand to explain just how difficult Mr. Grayson's fun problem had been. This is graduate-level abstract algebra, said Dr. Marlin, a Harvard professor. The fact that she solved it under pressure in real time, without error, indicates both deep understanding and unique pattern recognition. Would you call it a miracle? Monique asked. No, Dr. Marlin replied. I'd call it overlooked talent finally given a window. But as powerful as the testimony was, Nia noticed the jury's expressions. Their eyes glazed during the technical parts. Some leaned back when terms like inverse mapping or iterative logic were used. And that's when it hit her. They weren't sure if the math mattered. The truth wasn't in the numbers. It was in the perception of who was allowed to carry them. Nia was called to the stand on the third day. She wore a simple navy dress, no makeup, hair tied back. Her voice was calm, but inside her chest, storms raged. Monique led gently. Tell us about that day. The day Mr. Grayson called on you. Nia recounted every moment. The smirk, the problem, the way the room went silent, the fire alarm, the shifting energy. Did you solve it? Yes. Why didn't you speak up before? Because I was always told to stay quiet. Be grateful. Don't make trouble. And now I understand that silence helps the system. Speaking up, even when it costs everything, is how you break it. The courtroom was quiet. Then the defense began. They attacked her tone, her attitude. They implied she was hostile, overly confident, combative. Not once did they mention her actual work. They didn't need to, because this wasn't about math. It was about whether a black girl could be brilliant and unapologetic at the same time, and still be believed. After she stepped down, Monique whispered, You held your own. They're rattled. But the next move was one they didn't expect. The defense called their final witness. Monique's brow furrowed. They didn't disclose this, she whispered. The bailiff opened the side door. In walked a woman in her late 30s, red lipstick, a silk blouse. Nia's breath caught. It was Miss Carly Vance, her freshman year math teacher. A woman Nia hadn't seen in years. The same teacher who'd once told her she was bright but impatient. The one who recommended a lower-level math class, despite her top test scores. Nia's pulse raced. Why was she here? The defense attorney smiled. We call Ms. Vance to provide context on the plaintiff's academic development. As Ms. Vance took the stand, Nia's knuckles tightened around her seat. The defense introduced a new witness. Someone Nia never expected. Her freshman year math teacher. The courtroom chilled when Miss Carly Vance sat down. For Nia Cartwright, the moment felt like a rewind she never asked for. A time machine dragging her back to freshman year. To a classroom where her hand was always raised, but rarely called on. Where praise for potential came wrapped in criticism of tone, of posture, of attitude. Carly Vance looked polished, confident, the kind of teacher parents trusted without question. Her smile was precise, controlled, but Nia had known that smile before. It was the same one she used when she told Nia, You're smart, but you're not quite there yet. The defense attorney stood. Miss Vance, how long did you teach Nia Cartwright? Just her freshman year, Vance replied, folding her hands neatly. In our honors geometry track. And what was your impression of her as a student? She smiled again. That slow, measured smile Nia had come to dread. She was bright, naturally gifted, no doubt, she began. But Nia sometimes had difficulty with instruction. She preferred to do things her own way. It created friction. Occasionally, a murmur rippled through the room. Monique Ellis stood instantly. Objection. Vague characterization. The judge raised an eyebrow. Sustained. Please clarify, Miss Vance. Vance nodded, almost graciously. Of course, Nia often challenged my teaching, not maliciously, but frequently. She skipped steps in her solutions, sometimes refused corrections, even when procedures were clearly explained. It wasn't that she didn't understand, it's that she didn't want to follow the process. Nia clenched her fists under the table. The defense leaned in. So she resisted structure? Yes, that's fair, Vance said. She wanted to prove she was the smartest person in the room. That can be difficult to manage, especially with adolescents. Monique rose again. Did she complete her assignments? Yes. Were her grades high? Generally, yes. Did she ever cheat? No. Then what exactly made her difficult? Vance paused, just long enough for the silence to bloom into doubt. She had trouble being told no. Monique's voice dropped. You mean she had confidence? No, Vance replied. She had defiance. The word landed with a thud in the room. On the jury bench, Nia saw the shift. A few jurors leaned back. One crossed her arms. Another tilted his head, skepticism forming like fog on glass. And there it was. The betrayal. Not an attack on her math. An attack on her manner. It wasn't about intelligence anymore. It was about attitude. The unspoken message. She might be right, but she's not likable enough to believe. Nia sat frozen, remembering every time Vance had given her back a test with the comment, "Slow down, you're rushing." Even when she was right. Especially when she was right. Monique pressed on, but the damage was done. "Do you believe Miss Cartwright was academically capable of solving the problem Mr. Grayson assigned?" she asked. "I believe she's capable of many things," Vance said, her smile back again. "But the method matters, and sometimes, in her drive to impress, she skipped the method." It was tone policing, sharpened and practiced. Outside the courthouse, the protesters were growing louder. Signs waved. "Believe black students." She solved it. Defiance maced dishonesty. But inside, the system clung to its rules. The defense rested, and the weight of Miss Vance's testimony lingered like smoke. That evening, Nia walked the courthouse steps slower than usual. Her parents flanked her, cameras flashed, but she didn't respond. Her brother watched from the car, holding a handmade sign that read, "My sister tells the truth." She wanted to believe that was enough, but she knew better. Back at the hotel, Monique's jaw was tight. She paced while Nia sat curled on the couch, arms around her knees. She was brought in for one reason, Monique muttered, to humanize their doubt. "She made me sound like a brat," Nia whispered. "She made you sound threatening," Monique corrected. "And that's what they wanted." Nia didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mind kept circling the same truth. It wasn't just about the equation. It was never about the equation. It was about whether a black girl could be confident without being punished for it. That night, a clip of Carly Vance's testimony surfaced online. The internet dissected it. Some called it measured and fair. Others saw through it instantly. One Twitter thread broke it down line by line. "This is how tone policing works. Undermine brilliance by reframing it as arrogance." Nia read every word. But the courtroom didn't operate by retweets. It operated by perception. And perception, she was learning, was a currency she didn't control. The following morning, outside the courthouse, the protest had doubled. Local news vans now lined the block. A former student of Mr. Grayson, a boy named Devin Lewis, stepped up to a mic. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I left the AP program because I was tired of being made to feel like I didn't belong. Nia is the reason I'm finally saying something. She didn't just solve that problem, she solved all of ours." Inside, the judge called the final motions. Monique stood one last time. "Let's be clear," she said, to the jury. "This case is not about personality. It's about patterns. It's not about tone. It's about truth. A student should not have to shrink to be seen." Then the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Time slowed. Every tick of the courthouse clock felt louder than the last. Nia sat with her family. Her attorney, the former students. All waiting. Hoping. Dreading. Lunch passed. The sun shifted across the window. Still, no word. Then, just as twilight began to settle, the judge re-entered unexpectedly. He looked more tired than before. He adjusted his glasses, then cleared his throat. "Before we proceed to a final ruling," he said, "I have received a note from a juror." The room froze. He held up the folded paper, its creases sharp. "It states there may be an issue that compromises the integrity of this jury." Gasps murmured across the courtroom. Nia's heart pounded. Monique stood instantly. "Your Honor, may we approach?" He nodded. She leaned in. So did the defense. Whispers exchanged. Nia watched as the bailiff exited through the side door. The judge straightened his robe. "I will recess the court until this matter is clarified," he said. Nia turned to Monique as soon as the gavel fell. "What happened?" she asked. Monique's expression was unreadable. "A juror thinks something's not right," she said quietly. "What does that mean?" Monique looked her in the eye. "It means someone might have tampered with the verdict." On the eve of the verdict, a juror slipped a note to the judge. Something wasn't right. The courtroom air hung heavier than ever. The judge hadn't returned for over 2 hours since reading the juror's note aloud. In the gallery, the hum of nervous whispers replaced the earlier stillness. Outside, protesters didn't leave. They multiplied. Candlelight vigils lined the courthouse steps as local organizers passed out water and quietly reminded people, "No matter the verdict, we keep fighting." Inside, Nia sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She stared down, replaying Carly Vance's testimony over and over in her mind. No matter how far she came, it always circled back to someone older, whiter, and more reasonable, rebranding her confidence as a threat. Monique leaned over gently. "This isn't over," she said. "No matter what happens today." Nia nodded, but her throat was tight. Her father squeezed her shoulder from behind. Her mother whispered a prayer. Then the door opened. The judge returned. His robe looked slightly crooked now, his expression drawn and severe. He adjusted his glasses, exhaled, and addressed the courtroom. "A serious matter has been brought to the court's attention," he began. "We have reason to believe that an external party attempted to influence this trial by contacting one of the jurors during deliberation." Gasps echoed across the room. Nia didn't move. The judge continued, voice firmer now. "Specifically, phone records indicate that Mr. Daniel Lawrence, father of student Bryce Lawrence, placed a call to Juraton 5 on the evening of deliberation, lasting 7 minutes. Content of the call is under investigation, but its existence alone violates the sanctity of this process." A sickening wave passed through Nia. Her ears buzzed. Bryce. Of course it was Bryce. She turned slowly toward the defense table. Bryce sat in the second row behind Mr. Grayson, now visibly tense. His father, seated beside him, looked ashen, caught mid-motion, halfway standing and then freezing in place. Monique stood. "Your Honor, based on this violation, we request the jury be dismissed and this trial declared void." The defense attorney tried to object. "There's no evidence of coercion, only a call." The judge slammed the gavel. "This trial has been compromised. I hereby declare a mistrial." Silence collapsed into chaos. The gallery erupted, some in gasps, others in disbelief, a few in cries of "they did it again." Reporters lunged forward. Cell phones rose like hands in a sea, capturing every second. Nia didn't move. She sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the bench where 12 people had tried and failed to give her truth a home. Mr. Grayson stood slowly. His lawyer whispered something into his ear. He didn't smile this time. He simply turned and walked toward the door. Free. Again. The headlines were already being written. Nia Cartwright's trial declared mistrial after tampering. Teacher accused of discrimination walks free. Outside, the protest transformed. Anger rippled like thunder. Megaphones buzzed. A chant grew louder and louder. "She solved it. They buried it." That night, the video of the mistrial announcement flooded the internet. News anchors debated it on split screens. Hashtags trended for hours. "She solved it. Mistrial for Grayson. Cartwright truth. We are in ya." Students at Oak Ridge High walked out the next morning. Over 100 of them, many wearing homemade shirts that read "System Error. Reboot Needed." Nia watched it all from home. Sitting on the floor in her hoodie, scrolling quietly, her inbox was flooded. Messages from strangers, survivors, parents, journalists. But one message made her stop breathing. Subject line: Harvard response to recent developments. She clicked. The email was brief. "Nia, we followed your case closely and reviewed your work independently. The depth, discipline, and determination you've shown reflect everything our university stands for. We are thrilled to formally offer you a place in our incoming class. Additionally, we would be honored if you would consider delivering the student keynote at our commencement ceremony this year. Harvard Admissions Committee." She read it twice, 3 times, then burst into tears. Her father found her like that, sobbing quietly, shoulders shaking, the laptop screen still glowing beside her. He sat beside her, said nothing, and just held her. It wasn't a victory, but it was validation. The next morning she accepted the offer. Harvard posted the announcement later that day. Student mathematician and civil rights advocate Nia Cartwright to speak at commencement. Photos of her filled news articles. One from the courthouse, another from the whiteboard video, a third unexpected from middle school, wearing glasses too big for her face, and a science fair ribbon around her neck. A viral comment under one post read, "She didn't lose the case. She exposed the game." But inside, Nia still carried weight. Because Mr. Grayson was still teaching. Because the school district hadn't changed policy. Because her family still checked their mailbox with hesitation, wondering if another anonymous envelope would arrive. And yet something had shifted. People were listening. One night, while preparing her speech, Nia got another message. It came through Instagram, from a girl named Trinity. a junior in Georgia. They're doing it to me too, the message read. Same setup, same type of teacher. I saw your story. I thought I was crazy until I watched your video. Can you help me? Mia stared at the message for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she began to type. Harvard reached out directly, not just with acceptance but with an offer to speak at commencement. The applause was thunderous. It echoed across the grand expanse of Harvard Yard, where thousands sat in rows of white chairs, the caps and gowns of graduating students forming a mosaic of futures in waiting. At the center stood a single microphone on a stage adorned with banners, and behind it stood Nia Cartwright. Her robe was crimson, her hair braided back into a crown. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what she was about to say. She'd practiced the speech dozens of times, but nothing could prepare her for the view. Generations watching, cameras ready. History, just on the edge of being rewritten. She took a breath. When I was 16, she began. I solved an equation that wasn't supposed to have an answer. Not because the math was too complex, but because the classroom wasn't built for me to solve it. A hush fell over the crowd. I stood in front of a room where brilliance had rules. And none of those rules were written for girls like me. For black students who are told they're exceptional, but expected to stay silent, who are praised in private and erased in public. She paused. You don't always notice the racism in your education system, because it doesn't scream. It whispers. It smiles. It says, you're smart, but it says, maybe next time. It says, be humble, but what it really means is be smaller. The audience was silent now, not out of confusion, but reverence. So I stopped being small. Her voice rose, steady and unflinching. I challenged the structure. I spoke up. I showed my work. And in return I was doubted, sabotaged, and discredited. My records were hacked. My family threatened. A trial was tampered with. And still, I kept solving. A slow wave of emotion passed through the crowd. Some students clutched their programs tighter. Parents wiped their eyes. Professors leaned in.
Nia continued.
I didn't win that trial, but I didn't lose either. Because what I gained was something far more powerful. The proof. Proof that truth, once spoken out loud, multiplies. It expands. And it can't be folded back into silence. She paused, letting that land. My name is Nia Cartwright. And I'm not the exception. I'm the blueprint for a system that tried to erase me and failed. The crowd erupted. Some stood. Some shouted her name. Others held their fists in the air. In that moment, the girl who once sat quietly in the back of an AP calculus class, unnoticed, uncalled on, was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. The speech went viral within hours. Clips circulated online, stitched across every platform. Activists reposted it. Students tagged friends, teachers, good ones, reshared it in classrooms as a lesson in courage and clarity. And for the first time, something shifted at the policy level. State representatives introduced bills requiring annual equity audits in public schools. One senator proposed legislation mandating anonymous student evaluations for teacher recommendations. A national campaign launched to create a federal office for educational discrimination oversight, spearheaded by a coalition that credited Nia's case as the catalyst. The headline in the Atlantic read, "From Chalkboard to Congress, the girl who solved more than math." Mr. Grayson, under increasing pressure and a fresh internal investigation, quietly resigned from Oak Ridge High. No public statement. No press conference. Just a bland email from the district. Mr. Grayson has chosen to pursue other opportunities. Bryce, once the golden boy, transferred out mid-semester. His football scholarship was revoked after reporters uncovered text messages he sent to classmates bragging about his father's control over school decisions. But Nia didn't celebrate. She reflected. Because dismantling a system doesn't happen with a single solution. It happens with sustained resistance. She spent her summer traveling, not for vacation, but to speak. Universities invited her. Legal panels requested her presence. She sat in rooms once reserved for experts and policymakers, now called upon to guide them. Still, none of it inflated her. She returned to herself at night, notebook open, fingers twitching over formulas and proofs. Because math had always been her first language. Advocacy was born out of necessity. But numbers were home. That fall, she began her graduate work in applied mathematics. She walked across the Harvard campus with a backpack. No security detail. No press. Just a girl with headphones and a mind built to see the patterns others missed. She thought the worst was behind her. Then, one night it happened again. She was working late in the campus library, her laptop glowing against the dim overhead light. Her coffee had gone cold, but she hadn't noticed. Her screen was filled with an algorithm. Something new, something beautiful. Then her phone buzzed. A DM request on Instagram. She nearly ignored it, but something about the message preview stopped her. "They're doing it to me too," she clicked. The sender's name was Trinity, a high school junior from Georgia. Her message was long, but urgent. "I saw your story. I watched your video. I'm in a calculus class right now. My teacher does the same things. Ignores me, doubts me, pushes others forward. He told me the only reason I passed the first test was luck. Said I should switch out. I know I'm good, but he makes me feel like I'm faking. I thought I was imagining it. Until I found you." Nia sat back in her chair. The silence of the library pressed around her. This wasn't over. It never had been. She typed back slowly, carefully. "You're not imagining it. And you're not alone." A pause. Then, "Let's talk." The screen pulsed quietly. A typing bubble appeared on Trinity's end. For the first time in months, Nia felt the same fire she felt the day she picked up that piece of chalk. This wasn't about one classroom anymore. It was about every student made to feel like their excellence was accidental. It was about every teacher who weaponized silence as a form of control. It was about the girls, like Trinity, and the thousands more just like her. As Nia began her graduate work, she received a message from a girl in Georgia. "They're doing it to me too." The Georgia air was thick with heat, even in early spring. As Nia Cartwright stepped off the plane, her backpack slung over one shoulder, she could feel the weight of familiarity settle over her like an old coat. It wasn't the city that reminded her of home. It was the energy. The same low hum of a school district that operated like a quiet fortress. The same perfectly manicured lawns. The same scripted smiles from administrators. The same whispered messages passed in hallways. "Don't rock the boat. Stay in your lane." But this time, she wasn't the one whispering. She was here to listen. Trinity was waiting for her just beyond the arrival gate. The girl stood stiffly in a plain hoodie and jeans, holding a notebook like a shield. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw Nia, a mix of awe and desperation flashing across her face. "You really came," Trinity said, voice cracking slightly. "I said I would," Nia replied, stepping forward. "You're not alone." They drove in silence at first, the radio low. Trinity kept glancing sideways at Nia, like she wasn't sure if she was real. Finally, just as the school came into view, Trinity exhaled. "It's like being erased while still breathing," she said. "That's what it feels like." Nia nodded. "I know." Trinity's school, Oakmere High, looked almost identical to Oak Ridge. Red brick, wide parking lots. A flagpole that fluttered more as symbol than promise. They entered the building together. Nia could feel it before they even hit the main office. Eyes tracking her, heads turning just slightly. They knew who she was. In the principal's office, they were met with forced courtesy. "We're happy to have Miss Cartwright here," the woman said, smiling too wide. "But we'd appreciate if you didn't stir up unnecessary attention." "I'm just here to observe," Nia replied. "But if I hear what I think I might hear, I'll respond." The smile dropped, but the conversation ended. Trinity's math class was in room 214. Nia sat in the back row as a visitor, but it didn't take long to recognize the pattern. The teacher, Mr. Hannes, explained a problem on the board, then opened the floor for answers. He called on every student, except Trinity. She raised her hand once, then again. He glanced at her, hesitated, and turned to another boy instead. "Anyone else?" he asked, ignoring the raised hand like it was invisible. Nia felt her jaw tighten. After class, she walked to the front with Trinity. The teacher looked surprised. "Miss Cartwright," he said, "didn't know you'd be joining us today." "Seemed like you didn't know a lot," Nia said evenly. "Especially who had their hand raised." His smile faltered. Trinity spoke then, her voice trembling but steady. "I've answered every question right for the last month. You haven't called on me once." He looked away. "I don't keep track like that." "But you do," Nia cut in. "Just not for her." The silence was thick. "I'd like to speak with your administration," Nia said. It was a request, but it landed like a demand. Over the next few days, Nia stayed in Georgia. She met Trinity's parents, sat through more classes, read Trinity's assignments. Flawless, advanced, methodical. She wasn't just smart. She was stunning. But the same machine that tried to flatten Nia was flattening Trinity. They began documenting, recording interactions, printing graded papers, collecting every moment where Trinity's intelligence was ignored, rewritten, or dismissed. The evidence grew. So did Trinity's voice. With Nia guiding her, Trinity wrote her own statement. She stood in front of her school board and read it aloud. Her voice cracked once, but she didn't stop. "You've built a school where being brilliant and black is treated like a threat," she said. "But I'm not a threat. I'm the future. And I'm not asking for permission to be seen anymore." That clip went viral. Again, another storm. And this time Nia wasn't the storm. She was the lightning rod. Former students from Oakmere began reaching out. Messages flooded in. "He did that to me too. She lowered my grade when I corrected her. He told me I wasn't math material." They started their own dossier. New reporters arrived. National headlines returned. Nia and Trinity didn't just file a formal complaint. They filed a joint federal complaint through the Department of Education.
It wasn't just local now.
It was systemic. The school board met again. This time cameras rolled. And this time, they didn't try to silence her. They couldn't. Back in Massachusetts, Nia returned to Harvard a different person. She had a new role now: unofficial mentor, advocate, investigator, but also graduate student, researcher, mathematician. She balanced both worlds with careful hands. She often met with Trinity over Zoom, coaching her through upcoming meetings, helping prepare statements, editing reports. But she also returned to her whiteboards, her numbers, her peace, because the fight never left her. But she also refused to lose the part of her that started all this: the love of solving. One afternoon, after guest speaking at another school, Nia walked through the hallway. Students greeted her, whispered, pointed, the usual net. But as she approached the exit, a teacher stepped into her path. She was young, maybe in her 30s, with sharp eyes and a cautious grin. "You're Nia Cartwright," she said. "I am." The teacher held up a notebook. "I've got a problem," she said. Nia raised an eyebrow. "Math?" "No," the woman replied. "Structural." She handed over the notebook. Inside were notes, reports, quotes from students who said they felt invisible, unsafe, unsupported. The teacher looked around. "They're doing it here too, quietly. Soft hands, sharp blades." Nia held the notebook carefully. "You want help?" "I want revolution," the woman said. "And I think you know the equation." Nia smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. "Yes," she said. "I do." She turned to leave, the notebook tucked under her arm, her mind already calculating the steps ahead. But just as she reached the end of the hall, another voice called out. An older woman, stepping out of a nearby classroom, waving a chalk-covered hand. "I've got a problem," she said, grinning faintly. "Want to solve it for fun?" Nia stopped, turned, and smiled again, this time wider, because she finally understood. The chalk wasn't just a tool. It was a key, and the door was wide open now. As Nia left the school, another teacher stopped her. "I've got a problem," she said. "Want to solve it for fun?" If you've ever been told to shrink so others could shine, if you've seen brilliance buried beneath silence, then you know this story isn't fiction. It's familiar. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.